Hello and welcome to Game Changer. I am Maryam Zia. In today's program, we'll be talking about the climate disaster that Pakistan is grappling with again. This year, Pakistan's monsoon rainfall has been 50 to 60% more than the previous years. And when we look at the statements by NDMA, it says that Pakistan is grappling with one of the deadliest monsoon seasons in recent memory, as flash floods and landslides have claimed at least 657 lives since last June. And NDMA Chairman Lieutenant General Anam also stated and warned that 2 to 3 more monsoon spells are expected before mid-September. And he attributed these to climate change. And when we look at the climate disaster that is, of course, happening before our eyes today, this is not the first time. This is, of course, in the last 3 years. When we look at 2022 floods, of course, 1/3 of Pakistan was submerged in waters, and now we are unfortunately witnessing that situation again. In today's program, we'll be talking about what needs to be done as far as preparedness for such calamities are concerned, and what needs to be the role of institutions, as well as the role of course, international cooperation in this regard. Scientists have long warned that climate change is making our monsoons more violent and glacier melts more dangerous. Yet, when we look at the preparedness, it unfortunately remains very weak. In today's program, we will be talking about all these dimensions and what needs to be done at this point in time. To discuss this and more, we are joined in the studios by Dr. Pervaiz Amir, who is flood expert. Welcome to the program. We're also joined by environmentalist Dr. Irfan. Welcome to the program. And we're joined online by climate change expert Ms. Anam Rathor. Welcome to the program. Dr. Pervaiz, let me start with you, of course, with this recent flooding situation that we have been witnessing in Pakistan, unfortunately, since past 2 months, we can say, and now with the recent flood situation with over 323 deaths in KP alone, and a nationwide toll of 645, or rather 675 loss of lives since June 2025. Do you think that Pakistan has actually treated climate seriously? When we look at different indications and warnings by the scientists that monsoon is going to be more dangerous this time around, and this time around we actually witnessed that this is 50 to 60% more rainfall. So how do you see the preparedness level of Pakistan?
I think that has to be judged basically on what's happening on ground. A country which has already experienced this type of situation back in 2010, then as you were just saying 2022. And the repeat period earlier used to be 10 to 20 years. Yes. Now the repeat period is 3 to 5 years. Every third or fifth year we're facing this type of situation. And the forewarning was already there for a heavy monsoon. The monsoon onset has been about 15 days earlier. So that's why you're getting these 50–60% more rainfall coming at this time of the year. And it's very unfortunate we lost a chopper very recently, you saw 2–3 days back. The preparedness, there is 2 things. One is to be prepared, that requires a very different type of setup. The other is to respond, rescue and respond, which is the National Development, the Disaster Management Authority, you know. So these are 2 different tracks which you have to take. Countries which take long-term perspective of planning, they're doing it on research, they're doing in terms of institutions, they're doing in terms of communities, they're doing in terms of science-based approaches. What you have here is basically a rescue and respond type of situation, where when you have a flood, where you have a disaster, whether it's an earthquake, whether it's a drought, you have an institution which comes out and says that we're out there to help. But that institution can only be triggered or brought to into action when there is a disaster. What you really need is a long-term institution which looks at these types of calamities which are going to come.
You're referring to the adaptation measures.
Adaptation measures. Mitigation is 20%, of your input, 80% still is going to be adaptation. So that's the perspective which you have to take, and unless you do that, we very quickly forget, we forget 2-3 years back, I mean, 1/3 of the country, $30 billion plus in losses, and we are still overcoming it. And all your GDP gets siphoned up with that. Whatever growth you're getting economically, that goes. And this year it's very unfortunate. I think we are looking at a very, very serious situation as things are unfolding, And by the way, it will not go up to 15th of September.
Yes,
this will go all the way up to,
warned.
it will go all the way up to October, the first week of October. And the severity, I think, another 2-3 spells, if you get even 2 more spells like what you're already facing right now, you have a very difficult situation, which is...
Right, and that is very unlikely, and we have not witnessed this in the past, in the sense that you are saying and warning us that this is going to be not limited till September 15, but
could be up to October.
October. So what would be the reasons behind it? Because there are warnings of urban flooding, landslides are of course another reason, glacial melts in some areas are the reasons, but there is this phenomenon of cloudbursts. So do you think this is going to be another factor?
Yeah, cloudburst is one of the outcomes which we are seeing because of climate change. As your CO2 emissions are rising, they go up, while the world says in most of these international meetings, that we would like to cap the temperature rise to 1.5 or 2 degrees. I think that really doesn't cut the ice. The temperature rise is going to be much higher than that. What Pakistan is witnessing for these 2-3 months, I mean, we are breaking all the records, all historical records we are breaking in terms of not only Pakistan, but Europe, and you see what was happening earlier in Texas and these other places, all those records are being broken. So climate change is coming out as a full-fledged and full-blown type of phenomena. It's very sad to say that Pakistan is ranked #1 by the German watch, that.
Yes.
So the vulnerability part, we are the country which is most vulnerable in the world. CNN 2 days earlier, was pointing out that this is a country which is losing people like carrots, we're just losing so many people. And we didn't lose this number of people in the May episode with the war which we were with India, We never lost this many people in that. And here, within just a week's time, you see what's going on with climate change. So my feeling is that the severity will go up. It is basically what you have: cloudbursts, you will have tornadoes, you will have hurricanes. The words might differ, they change on that. The type of flooding which you're focusing on, 2 types. One is the riverian flooding, which you're witnessing right now. The other is going to be the urban flooding.
Yes.
I think it's going to be much more harsh when it comes to the urban flooding part of it. You see what happened in Lahore, you see what was happening in Chakwal, Saidpur over in Islamabad. So it's two-pronged, you look at those. And the third type which you're going to get is going to be the flash floods. The 2022 debacle was basically because of flash floods and twice the amount of rainfall which you get. So what you're seeing right now, I'm just looking at the satellite imagery before I was coming here, the area of DI Khan, DG Khan and Kuala Suleiman, that is very vulnerable area which we are going to be facing over there. So God forbid, now a lot of the people here won't be touched with that, but it is Sakhar and below. So if that water comes in, the main area which gets affected is going to be Sakhar and below Sakhar.
Right. And unfortunately, when we look at the numbers and when we look at this situation, Dr. Irfan, we keep on forgetting that, of course, Mr. Pervaiz, Dr. Pervaiz rightly alluded to, that we forget the historical factors and we don't take into account the lessons that we should have learned by now. And when we look at 2022 floods, of course, we know that more than 1/3 of the country was submerged. Unfortunately, millions of people were displaced. We had economic losses of over $33 billion. But at the same time, when we look at the situation right now, in 2022, Sindh and Balochistan were mostly affected. Now, KP and even areas in Punjab are affected. So why do you think we keep on reliving this nightmare?
Actually, the infrastructure, or what you can say, the governance mechanism we established for the disaster, that is NDMA or PDMA and DDMAs, they emerged just after the 2005 earthquake as an era, and that later transformed into NDMA. Keeping in view the capacity, particularly at the district level, the DDMAs, that is just nominal. PDMAs, yes, they have something, and the lack of coordination with the DDMA and the PDMA and then the federal. So, in that case, whatever we learned, as Dr. Pervaiz Amir was saying, science-based solution to these things. We are not relying on science still so far. We have been not even involving in many of the cases those who are really the people capable of providing you the science-based solutions. We are still relying on bureaucracy and other people's. So, in that fact, the governance for this disaster, yeah, I think disaster management is not the proper word. I always say is a disaster risk management, basically the risk management associated with this. So, it is not very far, 2022, just 2.5 years, 3 years back over there, and we did not even take into account the what you call the Met Office or the Meteorology Department forecast for these things, and have not considered these things. Secondly, the people response to these things is not, I think, very casual. Nothing will happen. Don't worry.
Even tourists were visiting those areas.
Yes. So, the one side the governing structures, or the on the other side the people response is just nothing about Allah Malika, nothing will happen, something like that. So, they don't rely. And what he was talking about, the urban flooding, again in this area, in most of the time it's not the flood, is a encroachment on the water courses that really create havoc, because it is something like somebody is standing on the railway line and then blame to the engine driver that he has crushed me over here. So, when you are making encroachment and development, and again in this is a poor lack of governance. While these infrastructures being developed on the water courses, they must have been stopped right in the beginning. So, the building control departments or section, whatever we have in different part of the country, they must have to take into account those things, and not this urban area, even in Sawat, another area.
Encroachments,
tourist
hotels,
infrastructure, they just encroach their just for, I think, the greed for the more income on the area, and eventually that's all destroyed. So, I think it has to be both way. The governing mechanism, like the enforcement from the government and the compliance by the people, and then it will make really good.
Anam, I want your take on the same point that Dr. Irfan alluded to. And historical data also tells us that since year 2000, 10 out of 20 major flood disasters occurred in this time span. Do you think this is solely because of climate change and climate related changes in the environment, or this is also the result of development and poor governance that Dr. Irfan earlier mentioned about?
No, Assalamu alaikum. I think it's a combination of both. Pakistan, as you can see, this is the second time just in a month's time that we've had really bad glacier lake outburst floods, and I would say this is not a one-off event. We saw this in 2010, these mass floods, then 2022, and now again. So it's pointing to systematic risk, recurring risks, and they're not isolated events. And every year we lose lives, and it's like we're like, oh, we're surprised again that something like this happened, but I think by now we already know that this is going to happen. So climate change is happening, which is true. Like a few years back, something we predicted for 2050 is happening now in 2025. But the vulnerability aspect of the country is associated with the impact of these extreme weather events, but also how you deal with them. And that vulnerability is sort of related to the governance system. If we understand that we are one of the most climate prone disaster areas, we're in a hotspot, climate hotspot, uh, and temperature rise is going to increase, and we're going to see more floods and more extreme weather events. So I think it's sort of upon the government as well to ensure that this thing is going to happen, to have those systems to again save lives and livelihoods. So I think
Anam, I want to interject here, and I want your take on, of course, the recent KP flooding and We also know that Buneer is one of the areas that is most affected, unfortunately. But we also witnessed that UN launched an early warning system for Buneer and Shangla just a month ago. Yet hundreds still died in front of our eyes. Does this point to a technological failure in your opinion, or this is again a case of a classic case of poor governance and negligence?
I think I'll call it a case of poor governance because we just don't need an early warning system. People need to understand that, if a warning comes, what do they have to do? Are there any safe havens or safe spaces where they can go to? I was also having this discussion recently with someone that, the vulnerability depends upon a lot of things. So, also maybe the systematic or societal structure in that area, especially in areas that recently had a lot of floodings in KP. In those areas, a lot of men have moved, to cities like Lahore and Islamabad and Rawalpindi to work. So it's a lot of women and children there. Do they have a system in that society that women can leave the house if something like this happens? Again, are there safe spaces for them to move? So all these questions are really important. That also, how are they getting the messages? A lot of the time these messages are in the form of the apps. Do people in those communities even own smartphones? What's the literacy rate? Can they understand the message? So we have to ensure that these messages, these early warning systems that we put up, but how are those messages communicated to the community? I mean, was it announced? Was it an SMS
Community
maybe in the local
mosques and
language?
community centers can be used for that purpose, Anam. What are your suggestions that what else can be done in that regard?
I think it's really important to work with the community on capacitating them that when a flood warning comes, what do they have to do? How do they have to leave their house? Where do they have to go? And then again, that climate communication, how does that message reach them? When we talk about local communities, it is local community centers. It can be announced in mosques, it can be announced over radio. But was all those things done? And even if they were done, again, did the people have the understanding of what they were supposed to do when such messages when such messages reach them? So I think it's a lot of the times what happens in Pakistan that, we put these early warning systems, we make these policies, but these policies are just books or in the form of text, and that's put in a file. It's the implementation at the ground level that's lacking. It's the bottom up approach that we need, that the community is empowered to also take a decision when something like this happens. We can't just make rules or make policy and expect people to just understand them and follow them. So this implementation is something that we're really lacking and something we really need to
Right.
focus on.
Right, implementation is lacking, but at the same time, I want to take on the policies, especially related to floods, because when we look at different reports, the Imperial College London study said that climate change has increased monsoon rainfall by and up to 15%, turning normal rains into deadly cloudbursts. Uh, why has not this scientific warning turned into some kind of implementable policy measures for Pakistan?
I think people are wary of this. We've invested heavily into this radar systems when it comes to the PM and the Pakistan Met Department. If you look at the type of warnings they give, it's basically very simple that, oh, this is an alert to all government departments. Please take heed that something might happen over here. That something might happen here or in this area is not sufficient. If you look at the US system, you have to be very precise how much rainfall is going to happen here, which area, which tehsil, which village, which union council is going to receive this much. For the hotspots, particularly like you're talking about Bonaire, you're talking about the KPK, you need to be very specific. This area is going to be battered again and again. So is the area which is Koh Suleiman, it's going to be battered again and again. Then comes, so the investment in the Met Department, I think it needs a relook. It needs a very thorough relook, a science-based relook. If the US can do that, if Europe can do that, we can definitely come to some specifics, you know. If you give specifics that this area is likely to receive this much rainfall, I think people will take heed. If you just say kahin kahin garam ke saath barish hogi, people they are not serious about it, you know, that all these guys keep on here. The other thing which I want to make sure, this social media is playing both a positive and a very negative role. If you look at the scare mechanism which is coming out there, anybody will go, he'll come up and he'll takes a picture, or he takes a picture which is 5 years old, he plays that picture and he creates the additional panic which is coming out of that. So the government needs to sit back. It's got a climate change policy. I mean, that's why it has a disaster management policy. Those are archaic. They are, I mean, if they were so good, they would be helping us out. It's not the policy, it is putting the institutions at the ground which take on heed, which take on the actions which are necessary to save lives. One chopper, that's not that area is so, they are making billions of rupees out of that, you know, from tourism. The commensurate investment should also be in billions. And we've been saying that again and again. Secondly comes that, all right, you do deforestation to such a level, the main cause of, besides the rainfall and the cloud burst and the landslide, these things, is the rapid deforestation of that area.
Yes. Yes, and you mentioned about tourism, and because of this situation, unfortunately, all the tourism infrastructure has already been damaged. Complete villages have been destroyed in this situation, and I want to take on the global warming and its relation to this flooding, especially when we talk about Himalayas and Karakoram. How do you think Pakistan's flood risk is actually a ticking glacial time bomb?
I think so. We've been saying that since about 20 years back, you know, with the Planning Commission. I came back with a study out of Oxford, gave a presentation there. When we came back, sensitized the top 20 people that this thing is going to happen. That's what the NASA scientists are saying. Everybody, CIA, one of the meetings I attended with CIA, they were making that claim, that this is going to be the most vulnerable area. We have nice people. We sat in the Planning Commission. Everybody heard us out. They said, yes, we'll take a few actions. Actions, zero. Nothing was taken over there. The issue, core issue becomes that climate change is, this is not even the tip of the iceberg. People are saying, oh, it's full blown. It's not full blown. Full blown, by full blown, what I mean is on Karakoram, on the Himalayas, on the other areas, you're going to get mountains coming down like atom bombs. That's what I mean by full blown. That situation is already rising. You're just getting a snapshot, you know, what you get snapshots over there. Gloves, we have some inventory of what are the dangerous lakes, you know, we have some inventory of that. That's not enough. We had some earlier studies, somebody was from Canada was trying to tell us that, oh, the glaciers in Karakoram are not melting, you know. It's only the Himalayas and these other areas which are doing HKH. That's not true. All glaciers world over are melting. With this type of temperature rise, all glaciers will melt. The situation will become even more dire. What you're seeing is this cloud burst. This is just tip. These cloud bursts, somebody was saying the other day that, oh, it's only in the hilly areas. No, that's not true at all. Chakwal is not a hilly area. Hyderabad is not a hilly area. This is not a hilly area. And Koi Suleiman, if you go there beneath that, it's not a hilly area. So the extreme phenomena, as CO2 emissions rise, temperatures rise. We are very clear on what happens to the temperature side. The science is very well established. The science is less established when it comes to precipitation or rainfall. I mean, we can predict, you know, there will be that, all right, there will be rainfall here, this is the cloud. But when it comes to CO2 emissions and temperature, we are very clear. That science, as well as what is actually happening on ground, the UN's resolution that will keep it to 2 degrees, that is out.
Yes.
This is going, the temperatures will go from anywhere from 5 to 8 degrees in Pakistan. Some of these areas, you are already seeing what was happening in this area of Bhasha, you know, in this Chalas area. temperature was 46, 47 degrees. Earlier we are hearing on those
Yes.
temperatures when it comes to Sibi. So don't take the average temperatures, don't talk about this, talk specific, which part of Pakistan, don't talk about Pakistan alone, which part of Pakistan are we talking? I think there are 8 to 10 hotspots. We need to get back to those hotspots. We need to put the institutions there on priority. First thing, we need the relief and rescue there first priority. We need to, as somebody was saying that, okay, a lot of the population has sort of moved out, people are working in Karachi and other areas, that's true. But we are all very happy when we see all those logs, all that deforestation coming in. We said, look at the opportunity which is being created in Swat Valley. You know, we'll have all these logs, deodars, and all the best wood in the world. You know, we're harvesting that, and we're harvesting that free. We are also going to pay the cost, and what you're saying in Bonaire and these areas, that part of that cost is that heavy deforestation which you're getting at.
Right, right. And glacial melt is one of the reasons, one of the significant factors that is indeed a ticking time bomb for Pakistan. But at the same time, Dr. Irfan, I want to take on CO2 emissions that Dr. Pervaiz alluded to earlier as well, that Pakistan contributes less than 1% to CO2 emissions, global emissions, yet we bear the disproportionate climate disasters. How should this impact paradox be framed in terms of climate diplomacy?
I think this is the prime important aspect for Pakistan at this moment now, to go for the climate diplomacy. And I think Pakistan can play a leadership role in the south, taking on the other South Asian countries and the African countries, and what we have created at the loss and damage funds that has just operationalized very recently. Or I think it has to be a proper forum at the UN level, at the regional level, and we have to come to this climate diplomacy. And the climate diplomacy is the only solution, and in that way, what we can do, that the paradox that we have between the emissions and our loss and damages over here, why we should pay for that. That's the other side. We say the polluter pays principle, we applies on the curbing the pollution. So here, those who are really responsible for rising this temperature, they have to, definitely it's not aiding them or giving them some aid, it's kind of a compensation that you have given to the atmosphere in terms of emission from the GHGs, and what havoc it is creating in countries like Pakistan. So they have to be compensated for that damage.
Right.
So climate diplomacy is, I think, the real time for Pakistan now, along with the other countries in South Asia and in African countries, and go and like the COP every year we have to have
Right,
a
but
group
at
in
the
this.
same time, Dr. Irfan, how Pakistan should be framing it? Because we have discussed with other panelists as well that there is a lack of infrastructure, a lack of governance when it comes to informing people and early warning systems, and implementation is not there when it comes to policies. So how should Pakistan be framing and advocating for that climate fund?
You see, for all that you are mentioning, infrastructure and the development, that all required financing. You see, climate resilient infrastructure or climate smart agriculture, all are techno-based. For this technological, we need technology transfer from the developed to developing countries, like Dr. Pervaiz Amir was mentioning, the US system or the early warning system, it has to be specific. Now, we have not yet achieved this Doppler radar system for this specific area. We just go for maybe upper region of the KP and the lower region of the Punjab, rain is expected, not like this, it has to be specific. For that need, we definitely need a highly sophisticated early warning system, and for infrastructure development, for the technology, that has to be transferred from the developer to the developing countries. In that case, we have to wrote about these things. And when we have created a green climate fund and these kind of mechanisms, so that is the channel, the window available. And for these kind of infrastructure development or this technology transfer, we have to use that windows. And again, for that, in our own house, I think here again we need scientists and technologists, those people who can contribute based on their science-based system to the government policy making that they should go for the development of infrastructure, how they can finance it from international windows available already.
Right, right. But at the same time, Dr. Irfan, when we look at the situation at hand, of course, international cooperation remains an important factor. But when we look inwards, there is unchecked construction of housing societies and other luxury hotels. How do you think what measures should be done and are needed at this point in time by the government in that regard, so that we have internal measures in order to go for and advocate for climate fund?
Yes, you're very right. The issue you are highlighting is purely our internal governance. We have building bylaws available countrywide, province-wise. Now recently we have also approved the green building codes also. They are there. Implementation part, that's our institution's role. So they should stop these kind of infrastructure development in water courses on unstabilized slopes in the hilly areas over here. So this is their job. So for that purpose, I think we have to have a strict enforcement of already availing rules and regulations.
Right, right. And Anam, when we talk about the recent flood situation, of course, it is a combination of natural as well as human made causes. And when we look at it from the lens of geopolitics, how do you think that the India's release of additional water into Satluj from Hyric headworks is making Pakistan more vulnerable to flooding situation?
I think that if you talk about the recent floods, they were glacier lake outburst floods, and the India opening the water didn't play a part right now or this year, but that can be something that might happen in the future. But there's a lot of geopolitical negotiations happening. Pakistan is having discussions on international forums, so uh, I think as people who work in the climate sector, there's already so much disaster that the country is facing. I think we're really hoping that does not happen. But I just wanted to talk about when we're saying about climate finance and what the issues that we are facing right now. We talked about international funds, the vertical funds like GCF, JEF, Adaptation Fund, and how we can use that for uh, building infrastructure, climate resilient infrastructure, flood resilient infrastructure in Pakistan. But unfortunately, the climate finance landscape globally has also changed a lot. Uh, International pledges are not enough, but a lot of the times, the international pledges that are done for these big funds or for foreign aid, they also don't materialize. Only a small percentage of that. So, as a country, we also have to depend less on these grant based financing instruments and see that how we can reprioritize our own budget. Because, as I said, these fundings are already less, and then climate change, as it's increasing, a lot of other countries are also looking at these funds, so the chance to get that financing is very difficult. So for right now, what Pakistan has to do is look at its own budget, how to reprioritize that, how can a lot of the time the country has we spend billions on non-development priorities for some grand celebrations or operations. We really have to ensure that those funds are taken into disaster risk reduction and also planning, not just risk reduction like after a disaster happens, but also like how can we reduce it before a disaster happens. And I think that's really important for Pakistan right now, and the only thing we can do, because these, as I think this is mentioned by the other speakers as well, that this is just the tip of the iceberg. Right now, if you look at global temperature, we're at 1.2 right now, and there's a chance, the studies are saying that by 2028 the temperature will rise to 1.5. And if this is what we're seeing, like two separate incidents in less than a month's difference in the same area of globs, of floods, of cloudbursts, So 1.5 is going to be a very scary time. And as a country, we need to ensure that how can we make ourselves, you know, strong, or be able to mitigate these impacts. Because
Right.
again, our priorities are saving lives, saving livelihoods. We did talk about encroachment and all these things, but it's encroachment in some areas. Like in KP, we've seen that a lot of hotels, this, when we talk about tourism, it's not
Yes,
sustainable, or
yes,
green
yes.
tourism. But in a lot of other communities, their ancestral houses are now on floodplains. So I think moving those people is really important, and that can be done by a very bottom up approach, by involving the communities. So I'll say that Pakistan has a really difficult road ahead. It requires a lot of work, a lot of reprioritization of budget, a lot of reprioritization of country's priorities, but we don't
Right.
have any other
Right.
choice.
And let me take the same point to Dr. Pervaiz. Dr. Pervaiz, of course, we discussed at length about uh, the poor governance and what needs to be done internally by Pakistan's institutions. But at the same time, we cannot forget the role of international diplomacy, international climate diplomacy. And Pakistan was a huge champion of loss and damage fund at COP27. But do you think that they have been a hollow promise when we look at their implementation in terms of giving to the countries that are most affected by climate change? And also, do you think that can Pakistan pressure these high emitters of countries into giving countries that are affected the climate finance that they deserve?
I think there is no question of any pressurization. The main player, United States, is out of this game. It's out of the game, and even whatever the few the countries which are left over, it's a wait and see type of approach. If NASA is out of the game, if research money is out of the game, 80% of all publications which come in climate change are from the United States. The institutions which give us the macro picture of what's going to happen in their funding has been totally wiped out. They're out of the ball game. So expecting that the international community will come as a savior, no. Mr. Gutierrez was just on the TV over there, He came out here, spent a lot of time with us. He is very sympathetic to Pakistan's situation. That sympathy did not translate into any money. The pledges which were there did not translate into any money. If you're going out for a loan, you're going for IMF, renewal of a loan, you're going to ADB, countries are saying, these institutions are telling us very clearly that you start putting a fraction of your GDP into climate change. That should be your priority number one. It is not these other areas, the political mongering and all that. It's not going to be those areas. It has to be climate change. So I think that is the shift. Pakistan will not get too much money from these JEFs and these green climate funds.
Right, but at the same time, Dr. Pervaiz, we see that South Asia is one of the most affected regions when it comes to climate change. Do you think that all the countries in this region can and Pakistan can spearhead such an alliance that is climate security related, and then we can ask for some kind of these climate funds that were promised to these vulnerable countries, and not as a victim but as something that we deserve and that is needed at this point in time?
I've sat through 7 of these COPs. I've represented Pakistan on the adaptation track. First of all, on this loss and damage, at that time it was particularly vulnerable countries, and the loss and damage part was started. It's not 27th COP, it was much earlier than that. Pakistan is not recognized in those countries which are eligible for this type of funding. Bangladesh at that time came out very clearly, said that, Dr. Amir, you should not be sitting here. The other 2 Pakistanis, you should not be sitting here. We only want to talk about those countries which are poor, which are below in the economy. We don't want you people to be around over there. So this is the pseudo hope. Who's the main player over here in South Asia? It is India. What does India do? 3 days earlier, they said, we reject the International Court of Arbitration's decision. We will going to continue with our hegemony of the IBT. We don't agree to it, and we will do what we feel like doing. So let's be very realistic. I think you have to be pragmatic. It's very nice. Bangladesh, by the way, gets a lot of money.
Yes.
only country out of in South Asia which gets money is Bangladesh. Because Bangladesh has the intellectual capacity to write those proposals. Out of that $100 billion, you know, the green, it gets a very large chunk. Me and you, we get nothing because we don't have that. We're not channeling, like Irfan was saying earlier, we're not challenging the intellectual capacity to do those proposals. Money does not float in the air. Money comes through proposals, highly technical proposals, you know. So my own feeling is, the way forward for Pakistan is, put some of your own money. Now start, after this lesson, after these 3-4 lessons, start becoming serious. I'd like to take my 1 or 2 minutes on this. I talked about 3 types of floods. I talked about riverian floods, I talked about urban floods, then I talked about floods which are generated through flash floods. On the riverian floods, there is no reason on earth a country like Pakistan needs to suffer from that. Whatever your flows you're getting from Kabul, whatever excess flows you're getting on the Indus, these should be brought into line on some structure which comes below attack. The politics aside, you don't, it only takes you $5 billion. It can be done in 5 years. The Bashas, the other Bunjis and these others will go for another 15 years, you know, where they're going to come on track after 12 to 15 years. This is some structure which was given to us by Liefnik in 1960. You can do it in 4 or 5 years. That's one structure below attack. The other structure comes also, which is going to create these riverian floods, is on Swan River. You build up a capacity which is 4 times that of what you get on below attack. You can build a long capacity. You also have to develop capacity to do diversions of flood waters like India is doing for Rajasthan. You're going to get a major flood on Satluj. We didn't talk about Satluj, that's already in the making. That situation will come up in the next 2-3 days. All this water, this billions of dollars of opportunity is going to go to the...
Right, and that's my question to Dr. Irfan, that IOM report also warned that Pakistan will face absolute water scarcity by 2035. So do you think we are prepared for a future where it is a new normal for Pakistan to have floods 1 year and then we are faced with droughts?
That's what he was saying. Dr.
Yes,
I
yes.
agree with him. Unless you have a reservoir system over here that can regulate water supply to provide during the drought period
Yes.
and to curtail your floods in that area. So it is not only thing, it is for your flood protection, it is giving you the regulated water supply during the drought area, and then as a byproduct, what can you say, as a power generation you can. So it is water security that go for your food security, that go for the energy security. So I think we have not yet prepared on that level, and in 2022, even now, we're expecting how much water has gone down the
Yes, wasted.
from the Indus into the
$50
Arabian Sea.
billion worth
$50
of
billion
it, $50 billion US dollars. Every time the situation arises, $50 billion goes
That
to...
was a huge opportunity that we lost.
And this is the argument which India takes again and again, that look, I'm a poor country, I have a very large population, 1.2 billion to feed. This is one country on the side which wastes a lot of water,
so we
all
don't
in the
have
name that we are
capability.
letting it go down to the sea. So, I mean, there is no answer to, at least I don't have one. Unless you save your waters over there, you divert what you have. Maryam, whatever you have, like for Satluj, for Ravi, right, you're going to get a flooding situation on Ravi. You have to be able to divert these waters to the deserts. Divert those waters to the deserts, build structures on the urban areas, build structures which you can, build canals within your in your cities. Each city should have a canal like Lahore does. What do you do there? You circulate all this water, you reduce the temperature rise over there. You build, give the security, water security to places like Sindh, give it to Balochistan. Put up a barrage in a large barrage near Sevan. Sindh should feel very comfortable with its situation. They should feel very water secure.
Right.
Unless people feel water secure, you know, and then this realization has to come nationally. $50 billion you're losing each year.
Yes.
Some people say that, oh no, this is not a loss, you know, it is going to this. When it is not put to economic use,
we have to
loss.
channelize that, and unfortunately we are running out of time. Your last word on this, Dr. Irfan.
I think what we have already discussed about the climate diplomacy and this Green Climate Fund, our capacity to write the bankable proposals, and one very important aspects that that's required an accredited entity to place your case into the Green Climate Fund. Unfortunately, none of our government agency has so far established itself as an accredited entity, because the 4 parameters they require, transparency, fiduciary standards, and gender action plan, these kind of things we don't have in place. So in that case, we have to rely on UNDP, UNFAO, and we had one entity, it was private sector JS Bank, but that's for 5 years, it finished in early 2025. So now we don't have, we have to rely again on this. So this is the kind of capacity that our planning department
and it should be self-sustainable.
Self-sustainable, that we should prepare our proposal and we should be able to present it before the GCF board.
Right. And Anam, as we are moving towards the conclusion of the program, I want your take on the point that you earlier mentioned about relocating the people that are in vulnerable areas at the moment. Do you think that migration of millions of people at this point in time, this could lead to another security risk, and what needs to be done when we talk about climate related security?
I think for now, we all understand that climate change has become a national security issue for Pakistan, and it's not just a development afterthought. And those people, we've seen the past few days, if those people are not relocated, they're just gonna, the flood water is going to take them with their houses, and we don't have any other option. But again, what we need right now is a rehaul of the governance system. We cannot stop these rains, we cannot stop these glaciers from melting, but what we can do is stop the people, stop these deaths and destructions that are happening, or maybe mitigate it a little bit. And for that, we really need to plan better. We really need to rehaul our whole governance system. We really need to put communities first. Uh, when we plan it, when we sit together, yes, there will be, people migrating is creates a lot of unrest. If you look at a lot of civil unrest in a lot of countries, somehow it is also linked to climate migration. But we can take from those examples and plan in a way that that does not happen again. As the previous speakers have also mentioned, we really need to completely overhaul our governance system and look at all the impacts and make a strategy, make a policy, make a planning structure or document that looks at all these avenues. So again, a long road ahead and a very difficult road ahead for Pakistan, but we don't have any other
A
option.
long road ahead, and of course we need to take on this challenge head on, because climate change has become indeed a big national security risk and a challenge for Pakistan. Thank you very much, Ms. Anam Rathor, for joining us in today's program. Thank you, Dr. Pervaiz Amir, for joining us in today's program. Thank you very much, Dr. Irfan Khan, for joining us in today's program. That's all from Game Changer tonight. Take care. Allah Hafiz.